So before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we are gathering. I'm joining from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the East Kulin Nation. And I just want to pay my respects to elders past and present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining today. I also want to acknowledge the many barriers that First Nations children face in accessing ongoing care and ongoing survivorship support as well. So thank you so much. Sorry, if you just go back a slide, Sarah. So thank you so much for joining us today for the Children's Cancer CoLab Funding Opportunity Info Session. We are really delighted to have you join us, and it's a good group of people. This is the fourth time we've held this info session. We've held 3 in person, and this is the last virtual session. So we're really delighted to have you join us and be interested in the work that we're doing. I'll move on to the next slide. So I just wanted to start by sharing a story. This is Sheila and Maya. Sheila is on our Patient and Family Advisory Committee. Sheila's daughter Maya was only 3 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma. Sheila tells a story where she never imagined her very bubbly toddler would see her very bubbly toddler lose so much energy and endure such many months of harsh treatment. Not only did she face harsh treatment, but she also had numerous complications and lives with the lifelong complications or lifelong side effects of her treatment. Although it's great to see Maya embracing her teenage years, her journey does remind us of those long-lasting health impacts and the need for safer therapies and more targeted therapies, as well as the importance of survivorship. That said, they have a message of gratitude for the researchers and clinicians, and really to continue and ask you to continue the incredible work that you do. Move on to the next. So thank you again for joining us. Today we will guide you through some of the work that we're doing at Children's Cancer CoLab. Sorry, just want to go back to the agenda. We'll talk about some of the principles that guide our strategic funding and the opportunities that will be opening up very shortly. In fact, in a week's time. We'll also talk about the eligibility and some grant conditions and the application process. At the end of the session, we'd like to leave as much time as possible for a Q&A. We do ask that you use the Q&A function that you can find on the Teams. It should just say Q&A. If you have any issues please just contact us on email, either using the same email you received for registration, or programs@cccolab, so cccolab.org.au. And we'll also share that email at the end of this session too. I'll just jump to the next slide. So just before we get started, I do want to thank and acknowledge our major partners. So we are Children's Cancer CoLab has been funded by the Victorian Government and a commitment from the Children's Cancer Foundation with a collective funding of $45 million. And we're incredibly grateful for their ongoing and enduring support. We also partner with strategic program partners like Maddie Revolt Vision and Red Kite on specific impact programs, which we'll shortly mention as we go through this presentation. I also want to acknowledge the ongoing support and collaboration with our consortium partners. This includes Royal Children's Hospital, Monash Children's Hospital, Olivia Newton-John, who've just joined us recently, Hudson Institute of Medical Research, Medic Children's Research Institute, Peter Mac, WeHi, Monash University, and University of Melbourne. The other reason I wanted to mention them is that these consortium partners are very key and important to our eligibility and those researchers that are able to apply for our funding as well in this round. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Udani Reeds. I'm the CEO of Children's Cancer CoLab. I'm also joined here by other members of our organisation, including Sarah, the two Sarahs. And so the two Sarahs are very important to our impact program funding and our opportunities. So please do reach out to them. They are really here to help you and guide you through your application process as well. And just finally, to also highlight some other key people in our organisation, including the chair of our board, Brendan Murphy, and the two co-chairs of our scientific advisory committee, being Grant MacArthur and Andrew Wilkes. Next slide, Sarah. Thank you. A couple of other things I just wanted to point out before we get into the crux of today, which is our governance structure. And the reason I want to highlight that is I might use some acronyms throughout our presentation, but just wanted to highlight two key groups, I suppose. We have our board, independent board, that really guide our strategy. But we also have an independent scientific advisory committee that provide recommendations on the funding opportunities and the funding decisions to our board. We also have a patient and family advisory committee made up of survivors and parents who are also involved in the review of our applications as well. One other group I think is important is also the consortium partner committee. So this group is made up of leaders from each of the consortium partners, and they certainly guide us and have supported us in the development of our guidelines and give us key input on, especially around future leaders programs, people, on what is really needed on the ground. So we have already, in the short time we've been around, we are delighted that we've already been able to award $5.6 million in funding. Sorry, that should be $1 million, not $5.6 $5. So $5.6 million in funding last financial year, and this year there will be over $5 million available. Today we'll predominantly be talking about four opportunities, so that equates to about $4 million, and more information will come out about our survivorship and living well impact program. Just go to the next slide. So just really quickly, to give you some information on who comprises our scientific advisory committee. As I said, we've got two directors that lead up and co-chair our scientific advisory committee. We also have national, international pediatric oncology experts, as well as drug development, clinical trials, and health service implementation researchers as well. And we continue, these little blue people here is just representing that we continue to expand this committee, and we would really like to, and it's a committee that we will continue to adapt and change. The other thing I just want to mention here is that whilst we have this advisory committee, we're also establishing what's called a review panel that is much broader and bigger, that will also support the scientific advisory committee in their decisions. So they may be subject matter experts that are specific to particular impact programs, and that we would tap into their expertise and talent to help really guide us. So again, I'll go through these slides pretty quickly, and I will hand over to Sarah to really get to the cusp of today, which is the opportunities. But I do want to mention what is really important about why we have strategic funding principles, and that really is that we see ourselves as a partner to numerous stakeholders, being patients and families, government, philanthropy, as well as researchers and clinicians. And really we want to make sure that we're delivering for all of our key partners and stakeholders. And that therefore our funding is guided by 5 core principles, 1 being patient-driven, 2 strategic and tactical, 3 is being collaborative, 4 is transparent and accountable, and 5 is milestone-based funding. I'll quickly go through those, and then Sarah will probably go give you a bit more detail about what they really mean in terms of eligibility and funding conditions. So firstly, patient-driven, and something I just mentioned before, we really value our patient-family contribution, and they really are part of our strategic decision-making, but also our strategic decisions, so I suppose our strategic decisions and setting of our priorities. So consumers account for 20% of the overall evaluation of grants, and we're currently working with our consumers to make sure that they're trained and comfortable to undertake review of the grants, and their perspectives will be integrated into that process. Through the EOI, so applications that have both a 2-stage process, you'll receive the feedback from patients and families, and also have an opportunity to provide your responses back. Second, we see ourselves as strategic and tactical. So importantly, we fund childhood and adolescent cancer research, and that's obviously a given. But we also want to support early stage, high potential research. So sometimes where research may not be funded through traditional grant making or grant opportunities, we really want to enable research projects that are highly innovative and great ideas, but that might actually attract, the ability to develop some preliminary data so you can then go and attract traditional funding. Applications will also be valued on value, so cost effectiveness and ability to, as I said earlier, attract and leverage future funding. And finally, how they also contribute to the broader ecosystem. Proposals that share data or resources or highly collaborative would also be seen highly favourably. Next slide. And that goes to collaboration as well. So we do prioritise and expect greater collaboration and collaboration in applications. So we would strongly encourage applications to collaborate across consortium partners, but also demonstrate there's you're avoiding duplication and not undertaking activities that may exist across the state and the country even. But we certainly encourage inter and multidisciplinary proposals as well. A key thing also is we really want to encourage, although our funding is predominantly going to Victorian consortium partners, we really want to make sure that that work is nationally and even internationally relevant. So really strong encouraging that Victorian leadership, but national relevance. And finally, a really important point for us is that we do want you to partner with us and advocate with us. We want you to hopefully work with us to support fundraising efforts, attend events, and we also want it should be a two-way street where we're also trying to provide exposure to you and your project as well. So really that collaborative nature and that partner relationship. So transparent and accountable grant funding as well. So most of our funding goes through open and competitive processes, and everything is reviewed by our scientific advisory board, if not also a panel as well, so that independent expert review of all our applications is undertaken. We also want to make sure that we have transparent grant guidelines and information. So these guidelines are now currently available on our website, and if those that are subscribed to our e-news, you'll also receive them, I think, directly to your inbox. So please do subscribe to those e-news to receive any updates as well. So finally, milestone-based funding. And this is a bit of a new one for many researchers and clinician partners. So we do expect a minimum of 2 milestones or critical review points. Ideally, these are go, no-go review points. But that said, we are flexible on this. So they should be meaningful to your project, and they allow us as a team to come back to you to have a conversation about how progress is going. That said, it's not black and white, and we understand that research changes, and we would, and therefore we will be adaptive to, and therefore again it goes back to being a partnered approach. We would like to work with you to really understand how your project is going, but also if you need those milestones to be changed in any way as well. These milestones also help us communicate progress to our partners, and also to potential new funders as well. But that said, if milestones aren't being able to be met at any stage, we would ask you to give us an update. But if nothing can happen, then future funding is ceased at that point as well. So I just want to stress, I'm very happy to answer questions about milestone-based funding, but also to stress that this is meant to be it's a two-way street. It's meant to allow us to really work with you and really understand your project better. It's not meant to be this black or white kind of process. And move on just to the last slide for me. So this round, many of you already know about our impact programs, but this round we will be opening up for application for the Next-Generation Therapies program, the Safer Therapies, and the Future Leaders. We will shortly, as I said earlier, be providing more information about our survivorship and living well. And Sarah will briefly talk about our Innovation Accelerator program as well, which is generally processed through a more rolling application process. So I will hand over to Sarah to go through the details of our funding opportunities.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So just going straight into what are the funding opportunities for the upcoming year. So we have Next-Generation Therapies, Safer Therapies, and Future Leaders. And the funding guidelines for all three of the programs are now available on our website. I'm going to ask Sarah to put a link to the webpage in the Q&A section. So if you're interested, you can head there and then have a look at the detailed funding guidelines. The last one I'll probably start with the one that we have open at the guidelines available at the moment. So Next-Generation Therapies, $1.5 million available, and we're expected to fund at least 3 projects. The Safer Therapies is $1 million for that category, and there will be funding at least 2 projects. And we're saying 2 projects because there are actually 2 themes in our Safer Therapies program, which I'll go into a bit later. Both of these research project sort of program will go through 2-stage process. That's starting with the expressions of interest, and these will be shortlisted by independent panel and our SEC chairs, and then the shortlisted applicants will be invited to put in a full application as a second stage. So the anticipated funding commencement date for both of the programs will be July 1st, 2026. And the funding terms, you can apply for up to 3 years of funding for each of them. For the Future Leaders, there's 1.35 million available. There will be 3 fellowship types, one in each of the fellowship schemes. So that includes an early career researcher fellowship, a mid-career researcher fellowship, and a clinician researcher fellowship. So there will only be 1 full application submission. What is different is that the full application will first be reviewed and assessed by representatives that's nominated by our consortium partner committee. So these are the senior leaders across our consortium partners, and they're putting forward together a panel. Conflict of interest will be managed, but the idea is that we want the consortium partners' involvement in selecting the brightest and that we want talents that we want to retain and keep in the field. So the shortlisted application will then be reviewed by the SAC and our patient and family advisory committees as a second stage process. The anticipated funding commencement date is 1st of July, but there is an option to defer the commencement date to better align with whether it's your current fellowship opportunities or funding available. So all fellowships are available for up to 3 years. On the right-hand side, we have our first partnership opportunity. This is with Many Rewards Vision. So they are a charity focusing specifically on bone marrow failure syndrome. So we are working with them to basically double up, amplify the funding available for the field. So it's up to $250,000 available. But the idea is that this will be a clinician researcher fellowship to someone working specifically in bone marrow failure syndrome, that's with intersection with pediatric oncology. So there'll be one fellowship available. The full application will be reviewed by a special subcommittee that's led by both of CoLab and Many Rules Vision Scientific Advisory Committee. That one, because there's only one application review round, it will be the anticipated funding commencement day is earlier, so that could start as early as February 2026 to be confirmed, but it will be around that time frame. And same thing, the deferral option is also available if you would like to take it, and the funding for that is up to 2 years. Just the general eligibility for all our funding opportunities. You will have to, the main investigator, so the lead application person have to be based at one of our consulting partners. Multiple applications can be submitted from each of the institutions, which is different to what we've done previously. So there's no limit on that. You can only be the lead investigator for one application for each of the impact program funding rounds. So you can be the lead investigator on one of the next generation therapy, but then you can also be on another one for safer therapies or future leaders if you want. But there's just one per funding round. But you can be limited as a project team member on as many applications as possible. We welcome adult oncology researchers and clinicians to start looking into pediatric oncology challenges. But with that, I think the consideration is that we do want you to collaborate, and there will be a formal collaboration of including at least one pediatric oncology researcher or clinician as part of your team members. The applicants would need to identify new and existing roles. With the idea is we want to create different talents. So the new roles is essentially defined as a new position that might have slightly different responsibilities and on the project. So it's just that expanding the creating different opportunities. One thing that Idani has already pointed out is that we do want to see collaboration between different consortium partners. That is a mandatory consideration, and you will be required to list a member of a researcher or clinician from another consortium partner as part of your team members. But their contribution could be either in-kind contribution, or you could also request some components of your funding going towards that collaborator. Yes, that was actually be viewed most favorably when that's going through the evaluation process. Just going into the details around each of the impact programs. On Next-Generation Therapies, these are meant we want to see very strong hypothesis-driven research proposals that's going to look at basic and translational research, new treatments specifically for the hardest to treat pediatric oncology cancer types. And we are welcoming any scope and different projects at different stages of that translational pathway. It could be very, very early innovative ideas, or if you have a bit more data and you're looking really into that last stage before you start a clinical trial, they're all in scope. And just wanted to point out that because we do want to be very flexible and want to support you as much as we could. So the level of background data that you will need to have when you're including your proposal is relative to where your project is at. For example, if you're putting in a very high risk early stage project, we're not going to ask as much information as you would have to provide if it's a late stage. But having said that, that's also tied to the amount of funding you are requesting. So just thinking about that value piece that Yidani has discussed. Milestone-driven management that Yidani's also discussed about. We do want to see at least 2 critical review points. And I think what's special about this is that also means that if your project is going really well, towards the end of your funding period, you can come back to us with a proposal that we'll provide it to the Scientific Advisory Committee for their review on how you want to applying for the next stage, funding for your next stage of your project. And that wouldn't be, that's a separate set of process that is not connected to that open competitive EOI rounds. So this will be specifically for your specific opportunity for your project. Moving on to Safer Therapies, $1 million available, and I've mentioned that there will be 2 different themes. The first one is looking at the basic and translational research. Apologies, I just realized there's a typo on the on the slides, but the novel therapies is basic and translational research projects that's going to reduce the treatment-related toxicities. So that it will be managed in a very similar manner as the next generation research therapies. So you'll have the opportunity to have the that accelerated or fast-tracked funding mechanism as we discussed. And same thing, it could be anywhere along that translational pathway, whether it is early or late stage. What's different is in the improved models of care. So that's more focusing on the clinical care models that would minimize the treatment-related toxicities. We're still asking for hypothesis-driven research projects. We still want to see that review points, but I think it's probably not going to be governed the same way as in a basic translational research, because we understand that if it's a clinical research project, you can't. You probably have to be very flexible in terms of meeting those milestones. So we're applying different approach there. That includes implementation science within health services research as well. But what it doesn't include is that direct provision of clinical services or family support services. Just want to point that out. So when you're putting in an application, you have to let us know which stream you would like your application to be considered under. And with the budget available, we're anticipating to fund at least 1 application from each of the themes. These are specific eligibilities for the project support program. Essentially, these are next-generation therapies and safer therapies. If you go to the funding guidelines, there are a lot more specific and detailed information about what's in scope and what's out of scope. But just in general, I think most of them we have already discussed. And what I wanted to point out specifically is around that salary that can be included under the project for personnel that are directly involved in the delivery of your projects, and they are contributing towards one of the deliverables. We will accept salary to be covered at your institutional rate with appropriate amount that's qualified for the person's background and experience, and then we'll also cover on cost for up to a maximum of 20%. And then what's out of scope is what we consider as platforms, development of platforms of resources. They are probably specifically to support research, but they're not necessarily a research project themselves. So because that will be funded under our Innovation Accelerators program. Future leaders will be funding 3 fellowships. We've up in the, as you can see up here, these are the maximum budget allowed for each of these fellowship opportunities. Same thing with the salary support for research projects. salary will be covered at standard employment costs at your institutions, and it will be something covered with a maximum allowable rate of 20% for the on cost, and there will be an additional support available for early career and mid-career research fellowships at $10,000 and $20,000 per year. One thing to know is that for those of you that would like to work on a part-time basis, you can reallocate the unused proportion of your FTE for hiring additional team members to support your project. We have included this on an equity basis and consideration, recognizing that everyone's situation is different. You may not be able to work full-time, or you don't just because you have other responsibilities. But then we want to make sure you still have the support to produce the equivalent research outputs for the duration of the fellowship, so that you'll be successful in your future funding applications. The Clinician Research Fellowship is a different model. So this is for medical, nursing, or allied health research trained professionals who would like to spend some of their FTEs on research specifically. So we're providing a fixed annual salary support of $85,000 per year. And this is meant to cover a minimum of 0.4, so 2 days a week of protected research time. So this idea is to buy your research time from your institutions. But this does exclude on-cost and institutional overheads. And as for the duration of the fellowship, you're still expected to maintain a minimum of 1 day a week of clinical duties. So when you're going through your application process, you'll be asked to nominate which fellowship opportunities you would like to be considered under. And who will be considering early career research fellowship is those between 0 to 5 years of awarding a PhD. Mid-career is 5 to 10 years of those who's had their PhD. And just noting that all of these, of course, would take into consideration of any career disruptions, and there will be an opportunity for you to provide a summary of your careers and also in response to your relative to opportunities to date. For the Clinician Research Fellowships, we're looking for someone this is for someone who's between 0 to 5 years, who's had their higher research qualifications. Just going on to the innovation accelerators. So this is designed for creation of platforms and resources that can be utilized to advance childhood cancer research, and they do have a specific evaluation criteria that's different to your traditional research funding applications. It's more focused around utility and access. How unique is this in comparison to all the other initiatives nationally and internationally, the governance model, the value for impact, and long-term sustainability. This year we are currently going through a reviewing the proposal for the Victorian Childhood Cancer Outcomes Registry, and in the past financial year we provided funding towards the biobanks at the Monash precinct for the static biobank and also the living biobank. The way that this will work is that there will be a place, an opportunity for you to put in your ideas. It won't be a very extensive application. It will just be similar to an EOI, I guess, and then they will collate those ideas every 6 years, and we'll present them to our board, and the board will prioritize and decide on which those ideas do align with the organizational strategy, and this being that it's in response to a particular unmet need for research purposes, and those prioritized ideas will be invited to put in a full proposal for it. The details on the timelines and how it will work, we'll be sharing those information later in the year. And grant conditions. So just want to let you know that we work with pro bono lawyers for our grant templates, and because that we're not able to make significant and material changes When you are invited to put in a full application, we will be provided with a copy of our grant agreement, and we really encourage you to provide that to your research office in advance so they have time to go through it and make sure and let us know if you have any questions. But the key grant conditions and all eligibility criteria that you can also find them on our website. So general conditions, I'll just go through them very quickly. The standard acknowledgement of Children's Cancer CoLab's contribution in funding and also the publicity requirements. What Idanis talked about, working with us to create website stories, create your profile, because this is really important for us and for our funding partners to fundraise and continue so that there is continuous support coming into the field to support the future research projects. Reporting purposes, we do want you to report on your milestones. And I think one thing to point out is that it doesn't have to be 6 months, 12 months, or every 18 months. It should be adapted to your project. If you have a significant milestones at 3 months, then that's 3 months. If it's 9 months, it's 9 months. We're not going by the standard calendar year or calendar month in looking at those results, but we will request a yearly interim reporting that's more on the specific metrics that we're requiring to report to the Victorian government. Same thing at the time of applying for putting in a full application, we will provide a template of those report templates for you to have a look. Compliances is pretty standard in terms of what you need to do, and maintaining a financial record, that's pretty important. And I think last thing I want to point out is that all the intellectual properties funded upon the project will remain with you and your institution. However, if and when we would like to see that the project's been very successful and you're able to secure a deal, whether that's a commercialization or licensing activity, and then there is a financial return on those activities, and for the project that's led to that financial benefit, if CoLab is the only funder, then we do expect a 17% of that net return from those events. But recognizing that's very rare, for most cases, CoLab will be one of the many funding sources that has contributed to the project that's led to these exciting outcomes. And in that sense, we will work in good faith with all the after funders to determine what will be the appropriate return for each party's contribution. Application process, I think we're still on track to open our EOI on Monday, next Monday, the 8th of September. There'll be 6 weeks of EOI submission period, so it will close around the mid to late October, and the assessment would carry out from November till December, and we want to let you know of your EOI outcomes just before we break for Christmas. So you'll be ready and to come back and start thinking about your full application submissions from 19th of January until the end of Feb. And then the second stage review will continue from March to April. And we would like to, so you'll be notified of your application outcomes around late May and early June, and then for the funding agreement to that review process to start so that we can have the funding distributed by 1st of July. Skip the page. Going back to the people support, it's very similar timeline. I guess there's only one application submission period, which is also opens from next week onwards until the end, until the start of towards the end of October, and they'll go through that 2-stage review process by the representatives from the consortium partners and again by the scientific advisory committee members. You will also be notified the outcome of that in May or June. But for, like I said before, for the Manual Rewards Vision, the timeline is different, and we will release the timeline for that particular opportunity sometime this week or later next week. The evaluation criteria are quite standard. They're all available in the funding guidelines. And we've actually also included the weighting of each of these criteria. And they are slightly different between the EOI stages and full application stage, just depending on the material that's and information is included in EOI versus full application. So definitely please have a look at those funding guidelines very carefully and thinking about where would you want to prioritize where the information goes. And I think that's it.
So we're happy to take questions. So you're welcome to put the questions in the Q&A, or if you wanted to turn your cameras on and raise your hand, we can also unmute you. So feel free to do that as well. But I think there is one question around the portion of funding to go to collaborators outside of Victoria. So it is expected that the lead CI is from the consortium partner, and that majority of the funding will go to either researchers or clinicians or staff within the consortium partners. That said, if there is an activity that cannot be undertaken, or if there's a particular collaborator that can't be undertaken, there is a case that can be made for funding to go outside of Victoria, and that would be considered on a case-by-case basis. So it's not a no, it's just, this is about ensuring that there's also building that Victorian capability. But certainly we want, as we said, we want there to be national relevance. So some of these projects certainly require national collaboration and international collaboration, and that would be strongly encouraged as well.
Okay, so we've got another question in the Q&A. So this is just around legal agreements. So if the host institution does have a request for changes to be required, how will this be handled?
So we will provide the agreement at the time of full application. So you will have plenty of time before you submit a full application to review that application to see that it aligns with the expectations of the administering organisation. That said, many of the administering organisations have already reviewed our legal agreement, so many have already approved that, and we've gone through developing this legal agreement with previous feedback. But I think what Sarah did say is that we use pro bono lawyers, and it has been decided by our board and the organisation that any really fundamental changes to our agreement won't be accepted. What we may do is take feedback, and then in the next round we would looking at that agreement again. But we really want to make sure that we can be quite efficient in executing these contracts so that you can get the funding quickly.
Perfect. There's just one more question actually, just around logistics. Will this meeting, will the recording be made available?
Absolutely. So we'll have this available to view, either available through our website or on our YouTube, but we'll certainly share that to registrants and also be publicly available on our website. I'm not exactly sure how, but I'll leave that to Meredith to figure out, but it's a yes.
Yep, and we've got a hand up. I'm just going to switch on them. So you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Now.
I can hear you now. Great, thank you. So just follow up from the legal agreement question. If there are, let's say, the drug development, etc., pipeline for new therapies, as you know, can be a complex space for that. The 17% returns on that is presumably that's negotiated throughout the course, because we won't necessarily know in terms of drug development pipeline exactly when people come through and when the VCs come through, for example, and how is that calculated proportionate to the investment?
So 17% is only if it was us alone. So if we had invested alone and you're immediately able to get an exit, that would be the only time that 17% would be applicable. at any other opportunity. So if you had, were successful at getting NHMRC or MRFF or VC or any other funding, that no longer becomes a requirement, and we would see that we would negotiate reasonably so that we could take something that's proportional to our investment, which was probably going to be minor compared to something, all the other investors that you would require to get a project to commercialization. So we would probably take something very minor and we'll take a very reasonable approach in that. The reason, yes, 17%, 17% is comparable in this space to some other not-for-profits. We really want to encourage projects to commercialize, but also to get further investment. We don't anticipate our organisation to be the sole funder really of any project, and we really want to support progress. So we don't see that 17% is going to be the most likely scenario.
That makes sense. And I guess also the question is the exit. Is that return, that 17% or fractional thereof, from the point at which a stage is funded or beyond, let's say, to commercial returns?
That's a good question. So we would be looking for a net return. So it's not like equity, we're not taking ongoing. So it's from the point of that first exit. So not ongoing. So if it's an initial license, that would be when we would, based on this agreement, that's how that would play out.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got another question in the Q&A. So 2 parts. The first part is, for the Future Leaders program, what is the balance in assessment criteria between the candidate and any proposed research?
Sarah, I'll pass that one on to you.
Okay, so for the Future Leaders, the weighting for the applicant itself is 40%. And we have about 30% combined for the research projects. There's also 20% on the feasibility, and basically it's on that institutional support. So making sure you have aligned with, especially in the case for clinician research fellowship, making sure you have support from your clinical department and you have a lineup on a research group that will be able to support you to conducting that research. And then there will be additional 10% is on the consumer review perspective on the proposed project. And the second part of the question is around the generation of new roles and collaboration. So that one, the new roles will be, I guess they will all be new roles because this is a new fellowship and therefore comes with a different description of your role. And how does the consortium partners with the collaboration? I think what we have encouraged in the application is that for you to find a secondary advisors or mentors. So mentor is mandatory for all the fellowships, and they have to be from a different institution as to where you're applying your funding applications through. And for the earlier career researchers, it is encouraged that you look out for a secondary advisors or supervisors from the different consortium partners.
Okay, so we've got another question in the Q&A. So with the clinician researcher fellowships, will you be eligible if you hold an additional grant funding for your research time? For example, MCRI, clinician scientist fellowships.
I'm happy to start in principle, and then I'll pass over to Sarah to go into the detail. So in principle, we strongly encourage people to try to apply for other fellowships during their time. So if they're awarded a fellowship and they receive another fellowship during that time, that's something we encourage. We want people to be finding other funding. But there would be a decision that would need to be made. You can't hold 2 fellowships, for the same FTE at the same time. So we would work on a case-by-case basis to see how that project, there's a few options that you would forego either one of the fellowships, either our fellowship, or can some of that fellowship be redirected to some research work instead that still supports your career progression. But it's not, I suppose we won't be black or white that, if you get another fellowship, then you lose this one. We would like to be flexible. But that said, you also shouldn't be holding 2 fellowships that pay for the same role. at the same time. And that should then go to another applicant. Sarah, is there anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I think what we really want to avoid is that duplication of funding. So if that's really the principle that we will be working towards in deciding on the eligibility of other grants.
Great. So I don't think we have anything else in the Q&A. And no hands up. So
yeah, so if there's any other questions, please email that program's email there. And during the EOI process as well, certainly feel free to email. And after the EOI process, you will receive more feedback from the reviewers and both consumer and scientific reviewers, and have an opportunity to respond, and also a conversation with the Sarahs if that is required as well. So I might just jump to the next slide if there's not any more.
Yeah.
And so we are holding a social event, the first that we've done for this group. So in a couple of weeks, we would love to have you all attend. It's really just an opportunity to connect and to collaborate. It's the first time we've done this, and really, it'll be your feedback that tells us if this event is useful for you. But yeah, please do register and come along. We're really grateful to be holding this event through the sponsorship of one of our wonderful partners, being RSM. And I think that is it. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything else that we can answer for you. And I think that, and the final page is just maybe sign up to our e-news, and we will let you know if there's any further updates as well. So thank you so much for attending, and we hope to stay connected.